Hello and welcome to this segment of Arts Talk. I'm Sherri Burr and my co-host for this segment is Justine Hines. Welcome, Justine.
Hi, thank you.
And we're very pleased to have as our guest, Bets Weaver.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Okay, so Bets, you've been working in the New Mexico film industry for over 20 years. Can you just tell us a little bit about some of the things and the roles that you've had in the industry?
Well, I started in Alamogordo, New Mexico, which is it's a funny place to start in the film industry because who would have thought? And then the film industry took off here in New Mexico. And so I started doing a little bit of everything, locations, I did craft service, catering, I did just anything they needed since I was the only one in Alamogordo. So I got a lot of training just by doing that. Then when the industry took off here in New Mexico, I was pretty skilled. So I was up here all the time with a suitcase in a hotel. We bought a place up here, and I'm still in a suitcase in a hotel because it just seems to be where it lands. Right now, I just finished a project in Santa Fe, so I was in Santa Fe for 6 months.
Wonderful. And I understand that you also worked on the film that's coming out called The Avengers. So can you tell us a little bit about your role on The Avengers?
Well, I had 2 roles on Avengers. Avengers, I was a driver. And so I belonged to 2 different locals. I carried 2 cards, union cards. And I was a driver. And then when In Plain Sight and Breaking Bad went down, of course, in the step of things, you can't have a number 2 working when there's a number 1 out of work, and so all of us that were 2s or 3s were let go, and I was brought back in. Since I am a production coordinator supervisor, I was brought in to work in the transportation office for Avengers. So Avengers went from New Mexico to Ohio, Pittsburgh, New York. So all of that company move was happening while I was working in the transpo office.
Oh, okay.
So it was logistics, trying to get the company moved from Albuquerque, where they were here for 6 months. So it was a big move.
Wow. Now you mentioned that you're a driver, and it's well known in the industry that drivers know everything. I remember one producer reading her book. She said that if you want to know anything that's going on set, including where people are, who's having friendships with who, that you talk to the drivers.
I don't know that the drivers would tell you because we all sign confidentiality agreements when we start. So they might know or might think they know, but I don't really think that they do. I think that that's just urban myth.
Oh, okay.
But, you know, I didn't know. I kind of looked at it like I was the hostess and I was there kind of driving, made sure everybody was to work on time and safe, and the trailers are turned on and heated, and I mean, there's a big job. The drivers work longer hours than we do in production.
And you also mentioned that you worked with Breaking Bad and In Plain Sight, and you mentioned 1s, 2s, and 3s. And I was wondering if you could explain for the audience what that refers to, because a lot of people aren't familiar with how unions work.
Right. In the Teamster Union, which is the drivers' local, it's Local 492 here in Albuquerque. 399 is the Teamster local out of LA. When you join the union, you are put on the number 3 list, and you have to have so many hours working, and you have to have, I mean, I'm not really familiar, but then you get, after 2 years and so many hours working on a production, then you move up to a number 2 position. A number 1 always gets the first because of seniority and everything. They have to hire all the number 1s first. Once they've hired all the number 1s, then they can go to the number 2 list and hire off of the number 2 list. After the number 2s are hired, they can go to the number 3 list and hire off the number 3 list. We've all gone through the process, and it takes a couple years to get through each level. Okay. So that's what it is. And then there's classifications. There's a Class A, which is a commercial driver's license. Class A, everyone pretty much knows that's the ones that can drive the semis and things. And Class B, I'm a Class B driver, which air brakes, and I can drive a little bit bigger vehicle, but not too trailers, I can't drive those.
Oh, okay.
So, and then there's a Class C driver, which is most of your van drivers would be a Class C, which is a 15-pass van, where you're allowed to transport more people. So you have to have a C, and that's the lowest classification of Teamster driver that I'm aware of.
Okay, okay, interesting. And I understand that you also have had a role on many productions as a production coordinator. So could you explain what a production coordinator is?
A production coordinator, anything and everything that is done on production hits my desk. Everything, whether it's camera, electric, grip, travel, hotels, catering, anything and everything, your expendables, everything that goes to the UPM, which is the unit production manager, and the line producer, or the executive, anything, it hits my desk at one point or another. So I have to be familiar. Once they start shooting, they cannot stop what they're doing in order to, let's say a lens breaks, and they have to get a new lens. They can't stop shooting and run to a phone and try and get one ordered, get that one. So it falls on the production office's responsibility to get that lens ordered, to make sure that it's shipped in overnight or counter to counter, depending on how important that lens is. And that's just one item, but it's the whole gambit of things. The cast contracts go through my office. We deal with SAG, which is a union guild, or after, this project was AFTRA, which is more television, and it was a television pilot that Tony Mark and I just finished called The Tin Star. It's a TNT project that Warner Horizon produced. But all of those contracts, we have a contract with the Teamsters, we have a contract with IATSE, which is another card that I carry. We have a contract with the Writers Guild. We have a contract. Everything in our industry is union-based except our production assistants. And we all pretty much started as a production assistant and worked our way up from there so we could have our health and welfare and not work more than what we work now, which is a standard 12-hour day.
Wow. Yeah, most people would think, wow, that 12 hours is standard, because people are kind of used to the 8-hour day.
We have that sometimes when our production assistants, one time I was working on a show, actually I think it was George O'Keefe up in Santa Fe, and I had hired a production assistant, and at 8 hours he wanted to go home. And we had taken him to work in a production van, of course, and he wanted to go home because it was 8 hours, and we don't go home at 8 hours. We work a standard 12. Sometimes if you don't get your shot, if you don't make your day is what we call it, if you don't make your day, you continue working. So sometimes you're working 14, 15, 16 hours. And that's just the way it is, and you just do it.
Wow. But the way the unions negotiate with production companies, you're required to feed them, right? Lunch, dinner, breakfast, a certain number of breaks.
Yes.
Because you are working them so
We
long.
start the day with breakfast, that everybody that goes into work that morning gets breakfast, because that's how we establish 6 hours, because every 6 hours you're fed. And that time is based on the time they get out of catering, and that's, you start your 6 hours, and 6 hours later you have to be fed again, and it's a sit-down meal. It can't be pizzas on a table, hamburgers in a bag. It must be a sit-down meal, because you do work long, hard hours, and it's a steady clip. You never slow down. It's constant 12 hours of working, because we only have a certain amount of time allocated to make that project. And it's so critical, and we all know how long it takes to make that project, and it's figured in the schedules. The one-liner and shooting schedules tells us how long that 3/8 of a page is going to take to shoot. And if we don't get it shot in the day and we don't make our day, that has to go to another day, which makes that day even longer. So we're very, very aware of what has to happen and how we can get through it. So 6 hours later you eat lunch, and then 6 hours after that, if you don't make your day, we call it second meal. So a second meal must be provided for the crew, and if you don't provide that meal, you get charged meal penalties.
Wow.
And every 15 minutes is a meal penalty.
Who charges meal penalties?
The crew. It's just an automatic. We have a production report every day which tells what happened during the day, what equipment was lost and damaged, who was injured, if the DGA crew members, which is your first AD, second AD, your UPM might be a Directors Guild member. Those people, if they work a 14+ hour day, that has to be logged on the production report. But it's kind of what we consider the Bible to the show that day. So everything is on there. So they'll write meal penalties or NDB, non-disclosed break, I guess is what the term for NDB stands for. But your cast members, everybody gets meal penalties if they're not broken for a break period every 6 hours. So
you got to pay them.
And then the union will go, they audit our books, as does the state of New Mexico, and it's audited to make sure that people are being paid what they're supposed to be paid.
So I understand that you worked on Georgia O'Keeffe, you mentioned, and we have a clip. So I wanted to show this clip and let the audience see a scene that was filmed in New Mexico.
All right, forward. I'll get it.
That was easy.
You want to know the truth? I sure do. I've never felt at home in the East.
So that was a clip from Georgia O'Keeffe, and can you tell us about the setting?
We shot that outside of Galisteo at the Vista Clara Ranch. It's a bread and breakfast type place, and that whole scene we dressed to look like Mabel Dodge's house.
Oh, okay.
And so it was lovely. It's a beautiful location.
When you're doing scenes like this that have a specific historical context, do you try to get permission to shoot on location, like at the Georgia O'Keeffe Ghost Ranch or at the Mabel Dodge Lujan house? Do you try first to get permission to shoot on the actual historical location?
We did, and it would have been fortunate if Tony could have been here, because Tony, once he read the script, and Tony is from Tesuque, so he is a New Mexican in his heart, and you can't do Georgia O'Keeffe movie without shooting it in New Mexico at her place of residence. So it was really important for him as a producer and the other producers to make sure that they were as correct as possible in shooting this project. And it was, we always try to get what we can locally, because obviously it helps production not having to travel.
Right.
It's a big company move. It's very expensive.
So was the whole film shot in New Mexico?
It was.
Oh, so
It
none of it was
was.
shot in New York.
It wasn't. We went to Las Vegas. There's a street scene for New York, and we took a green screen and we green screened Las Vegas, New Mexico, up and down the street, and then just placed old cars and
In front of the green screen?
in front of the green screen, and the whole thing was done in New Mexico.
Oh, wow.
And it
so
looks just like being in New York, but it wasn't.
Okay, so for those who are not familiar with green screen technology, can you explain how that works, so you're able to import a scene after?
It's all done in post.
Okay.
And the green, I don't know if anybody watched Good Morning America about a month ago, where one of the hosts was wearing a green shirt, and she got in front of the green screen and you couldn't see her because everything was blended together where it looked like it was clear.
Let's ask our audience if any audience members have a question for Bets Weaver.
So can you elaborate just a little bit more on the work you first started doing in Alamogordo? What was being done there?
Alamogordo was actually, back in those days in 1990, Alamogordo was probably the #1 requested shooting location in New Mexico.
Really?
But we did a lot of commercials. We did the movie White Sands. We did Mad Love. We did an awful lot of movies and projects in Alamogordo. I was not involved in that level because I was just starting out as a caterer, and I was watching the credits on a movie one day, and I saw on-site location catering by, and it listed a catering company, and I thought, well, I'm a caterer. Certainly I can do this. And the state of New Mexico had a film book. We don't have the film book anymore. However, they do have a website that everything is listed. But in 1990, for $25, you could be listed in the New Mexico Film Commission's guidebook for $25, the best $25 investment I made. Now I believe, I don't even think they charge to be listed on the New Mexico State Film Office website. But that's how I got listed, and then one day their caterer was fired, and they had, and like I said, we have to be fed. It's part of the contract, and they needed a caterer right away. And I've done weddings, and I thought, well, I can try and do a production. Production, not only do you just have to feed them, you have to feed them balanced meals. You have to have all kinds of salads and all kinds of vegetables. There's vegans, there's all different kinds of dietary requirements. So it took a learning curve, but once I learned it, it was a great way to break into the business. Then I was injured out on a movie